India's rich history is filled with traditions and practices that have shaped its culture for thousands of years. While many of these customs bring pride and identity, others have been left behind, deemed inhumane and harmful. Today, we explore some of India's ancient practices that have been abolished, reflecting the nation's journey from tradition to progress. In a society where a woman's loyalty to her husband was considered paramount, there was once a practice that tested that loyalty in the most extreme way: Sati. Sati was the Hindu ritual where a widow was either forced or pressured to sacrifice herself by burning on her husband's pyre. Although seen as an act of devotion, it was a practice driven by patriarchal control and societal expectations. The horror of Sati came to international attention during the British colonial era. In 1829, Governor-General Lord William Bentinck, moved by both moral concerns and the vocal opposition of Indian reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, outlawed the practice. The Bengal Sati Regulation of 1829 declared the act illegal and punishable as culpable homicide. Although isolated incidents of Sati persisted into the 20th century, they are now rare, and the practice is completely outlawed. This is a major turning point for women's rights in India. Imagine being just a child, still learning and playing, only to be thrust into the responsibilities of a marriage you never chose. Child marriage was once widespread across India. Girls, often as young as 8 or 9, were married off, losing their childhood and being forced into adult responsibilities far too soon. There were many reasons for this practice of forced marriage. India's patriarchal structure placed significant emphasis on controlling women's sexuality, especially within the institution of marriage. Marrying off girls at a young age ensured they would remain pure and under the protection of their husbands, reducing the perceived risk of sexual impropriety. In many traditional Indian communities, family honor was strongly linked to the purity of daughters. Child marriage was seen as a way to protect girls from premarital relationships or interactions with men outside the family, which were considered dishonorable. Marrying girls young was often seen as economically beneficial because the dowry might be lower for a younger bride. Child brides were also seen as more compliant and easier to integrate into the groom's family. Poor families sometimes viewed daughters as an economic burden because they were not traditionally expected to contribute to the household income. Marrying them off at a young age reduced the financial responsibility of the family and transferred it to the groom's household. Child marriage had historical roots in religious and cultural traditions. In some Hindu scriptures, early marriage was encouraged as it was believed to align with the idea of maintaining family structure and the social order. It wasn't until the Child Marriage Restraint Act of 1929 that steps were taken to curb this practice. And today, the minimum legal age for marriage is 18 for women and 21 for men. Once revered as temple dancers, Devadasis served deities, but over time, this practice became one of exploitation. Devadasis, which translates to servants of God, were women who were dedicated to the service of deities in Hindu temples. They played important roles in religious ceremonies, rituals, and temple festivals. As part of their sacred duties, Devadasis would perform classical dances like Bharatanatyam and sing devotional songs for the deities. Their performances were considered offerings to the gods, and Devadasis were seen as embodiments of spiritual devotion. They had access to temple patronage, were respected by society, and were often skilled artists, dancers, and musicians. Unlike many women of the time, Devadasis were often highly educated in the arts, including dance, music, and literature. Their education and training made them cultural figures in their communities, and some even held influence in royal courts. They were also financially independent because they received patronage from kings, nobles, and wealthy families. This allowed them a level of autonomy and social mobility that many other women in Indian society did not enjoy. Over time, however, the practice deteriorated into a system of ritualized prostitution, where Devadasis were sexually exploited by priests, patrons, and wealthy landowners. It became especially prevalent in southern India and in parts of Maharashtra. During the British colonization of India, the traditional system of temple patronage began to deteriorate. The British colonial administration imposed new tax systems and land reforms that reduced the wealth and influence of local kings and nobles, who had been the primary patrons of temples and Devadasis. As patronage declined, temples struggled to support Devadasis, and many were left economically vulnerable. Without financial backing, their societal status diminished, and they were often forced into exploitative situations or marginalized by society. Efforts to abolish the Devadasi system began in the 19th century, but significant legal measures were not enacted until after India's independence. The Madras Devadasis, Prevention of Dedication, Act of 1947 and similar laws in other states officially banned the practice. Today, although outlawed, the legacy of the Devadasi system persists in some areas, leading to ongoing social and rehabilitative work to aid the women affected. It sounds unthinkable today, but there was once a time when human lives were offered in sacrifice to gods, in a desperate attempt to gain divine favor, especially during periods of crisis like famine or war. While this was never widespread, human sacrifice did occur in ancient and tribal India. These rituals, though rare, were brutal. The colonial and post-colonial governments of India viewed human sacrifice as barbaric and outlawed it completely. Today, any form of human sacrifice is considered murder under Indian law. While no longer a widespread practice, occasional cases surface in remote areas, often attributed to superstition or misguided beliefs. Imagine being treated as untouchable simply because of the family you were born into. This was the harsh reality for millions of people under the caste system. The caste system, an ancient social hierarchy, classified individuals into rigid categories based on birth. Those in the lowest castes, particularly the Dalits, formerly referred to as untouchables, were subjected to extreme forms of discrimination and exclusion. They were considered impure, barred from accessing public spaces like wells and temples, and forced into degrading jobs. Untouchability and caste-based discrimination were deeply ingrained in Indian society, with entire communities pushed to the margins. After India gained independence in 1947, caste-based discrimination was enshrined as illegal in the country's new constitution. The practice of untouchability was explicitly abolished in Article 17, and laws like the Protection of Civil Rights Act, 1955, and the Prevention of Atrocities Act, 1989, were enacted to prevent caste-based violence and discrimination. Despite legal protections, caste-related prejudice remains a challenge in some areas. For centuries, in many parts of India, simply being born a girl was a death sentence. Female infanticide, the practice of killing newborn girls, has deep roots in some Indian communities, particularly where there was a strong preference for sons. This custom was driven by economic factors, including dowry and social factors that placed higher value on male heirs. To combat this grim practice, the Indian government introduced several laws. The most significant is the Preconception and Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Act of 1994, which bans sex determination tests and penalizes those involved in sex-selective abortions. While female infanticide has decreased significantly due to these laws and awareness campaigns, issues related to gender preference continue to exist, especially in certain regions. Efforts to change cultural mindsets continue. The exchange of dowry, once seen as a tradition, became a dangerous expectation, leading to harassment, abuse, and even the deaths of brides. The dowry system, where the bride's family is expected to provide money or gifts to the groom's family, often led to harassment, violence, and even murder of brides. Dowry demands could be financially crippling for the bride's family, and failure to meet these demands sometimes resulted in severe domestic abuse or dowry deaths. The Dowry Prohibition Act of 1961 criminalized the giving and taking of dowry in India. Despite the law, dowry-related violence persists in some parts of the country, although awareness and advocacy campaigns have helped reduce the frequency of these incidents. The fight against dowry-related violence continues in many parts of India. Social change is still needed to fully eliminate this harmful practice. The Thuggee practice, where bands of criminals known as thugs would strangle travelers and rob them, was a form of ritual murder in service to the goddess Kali. The thugs believed that their acts of murder were religiously sanctioned. The Thuggees operated by blending into groups of travelers, gaining their trust, and then ambushing them at night. They typically strangled their victims with a handkerchief or noose, a swift and silent method that left no blood. Afterward, the Thuggees would rob the victims and meticulously bury their bodies. During British colonial rule, a concerted effort to eliminate Thuggee was initiated by William Henry Sleeman in the 1830s. The thugs were systematically hunted down, prosecuted, and either executed or imprisoned. The suppression of Thuggee is considered one of the most successful law enforcement campaigns of the British era. India has come a long way in its journey from these outdated and often cruel practices to a society built on equality, justice, and progress. But the work is far from over. The progress we see today is the result of centuries of social reform, legal action, and the courage to speak out against injustice. Which of these historical practices surprised you the most, and why? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey through India's cultural history, make sure to like the video, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more content exploring the past, present, and future of societies around the world. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.